Turo car sharing comes with a lot of ups and a lot of downs. Hopefully more ups and downs though. But I talk to thousands of different car sharing hosts every single year. Hosts that are both brand new and seasoned that are struggling with different aspects of their car sharing fleet. And as a car sharing host that has been in car sharing since 2017, I have over 25 cars. I have learned a lot over the years on how to resolve many of these struggles that newer car sharing hosts are experiencing. And if I haven't resolved these issues, I have at the very least figured out ways to at least minimize the problem. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down some of the most common pain points for car sharing hosts. These are pain points that either hosts struggle with, or in some cases, they can be so difficult to deal with that they cause car sharing hosts to leave the industry altogether. I'm going to be breaking down what these are, what causes these issues to occur, and of course, how you can potentially resolve these issues with some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. Turo is a relatively time-consuming side hustle. Between cleaning your cars, checking them in, communicating with guests, this is certainly not a 100% passive side hustle. And even if you don't have to clean and check in cars, you do need to revolve your day somewhat around when cars are being returned. And the truth is, if you're a car sharing host and you have kids or family obligations, you have a 9-to-5 job, managing the side hustle can be overwhelming relatively quickly if you don't have the proper systems and procedures in place. And this is especially true if your car sharing fleet isn't large enough to justify quitting your 9-to-5 job for. And because of this, there are a lot of hosts that struggle with the time commitment aspect of Turo. They either only have a couple of cars and they deem that Turo isn't worth their time because they just don't have enough of it, or alternatively, they're a car sharing host that has a growing fleet and they find that as their fleet has grown, they have less and less time, and thus their ability to buy more cars has essentially been stalled. And in my opinion, the solution to both of these problems, regardless of which level of host you're at, is getting rid of deliveries and getting rid of in-person key exchanges. At the very least, getting rid of one of those. In my experience, the hosts that have a lot of trouble scaling their fleet and have a lot of trouble dedicating the proper amount of time to Turo and car sharing are the ones that either offer delivery, in-person key exchanges, or both. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand the appeal of going both of these routes. Whenever I talk to hosts, the argument for doing delivery is more often not the fact that delivery gives you more money. You can charge a delivery fee, you make some more cash, you attract more bookings. I get it. And while the benefit of doing in-person key exchanges are that typically you get a better quality renter. If somebody meets you in person, shakes your hand, and has a quick conversation with you, and then they have to address you after the reservation has ended, they are more than likely going to leave the car in good condition versus somebody that you never actually meet face to face. These are two realities of doing delivery and in-person key exchanges, and I recognize that. But despite the fact that I see the benefits for both of these types of business models, I also firmly believe that if you're somebody who's offering delivery on all of your vehicles or doing in-person key exchanges, that is a really great way to get burnt out on Turo extremely quickly. Remote key exchanges is the way in which I've been doing Turo since I joined the platform in 2017. It's how I do every single reservation, and it is 100% the only reason why I'm still doing Turo today. It's the only reason why I've been able to continue growing my fleet while growing this YouTube channel, while having a part-time consulting job, while exploring with other different revenue streams. It is the only reason why I've been able to juggle so much on my plate over the years. Remote key exchanges is basically the business model of not meeting your guests in person. Everything is done through the app remotely. So you communicate with the guest, you give them instructions on picking up the car, then you typically will have some sort of lockbox at the vehicle where the key will be in that lockbox, and then at the time of the reservation, the guest can simply go to the lockbox, get the key, and then drive off. And this is just such a superior way of doing business because of the fact that you don't have to revolve your entire days around when cars are coming back, when cars need to be cleaned, and when cars are going out. The truth is, guests are late all the time, and if I had to meet every single one of my guests in person, I would be spending literally hours every single day sitting at my parking lot waiting for cars to be returned. But because of the fact that I have a remote key exchange process implemented with my business, I can go about my day as normal and I can go pick up a car that has been returned at my convenience, not at the convenience of the guest. This also allows you to manage a lot more throughout the day and allows for you to have a normal life outside of Turo, which is important. So if you are a host that is feeling a bit overwhelming with either the time commitment associated with car sharing, or you feel as though you're not able to scale your fleet more because you don't have enough time, I really encourage you to test not offering delivery, only doing remote key exchanges. Try it for a month, and I bet that you will be surprised at the results. On the same note is the issue of traveling with your car sharing fleet. And if you are somebody that has a car sharing fleet or you're interested in joining Turo, the topic of traveling is probably something you've thought of more than once. I know for me, this has been a historical pain point over the last few years. And the truth is, there isn't really an ideal solution other than hiring an employee. Traveling with a car sharing fleet is really tough because you have to check in your cars every 24 hours, even if those cars didn't get rented out. So you basically either need to unlist all of your cars for that period of time or snooze them, or you have to find somebody that can actually take photos of the cars for you while you're gone. Now, there are a few things that you can do to help you go through the process of managing your fleet while you're out of town. Some of these are obvious, some of these are a little less obvious. For example, the obvious ones would be to use Turo automated messaging. This way messages can go out whether or not you're in cell reception. Of course, remote key exchanges is a no-brainer in this scenario. And the third obvious solution is to get help from a family member or a friend. In my case, whenever HP and I travel, we do typically hire somebody to watch our dog. So we typically will just pay that person extra to not only stay at our house, watch our dog, but also watch our Turo fleet at the same time. Now HP and I have an employee, so this isn't an issue any longer, but this is what we did for a very long time before we hired our employee. A few other solutions that you can explore that are a bit less obvious is number one, playing around with your pricing in the weeks leading up to you going out of town. You could either lower your prices so that your car gets booked out. Sometimes this will work as a strategy to get a long rental during this period of time. For example, if you are going out of town for 4 days, maybe make your pricing really low for that 4-day period of time so that somebody books your car for all 4 days. Now, this can sometimes have the unintentional consequence of somebody just renting your car for 1 day during that period of time, which obviously isn't ideal, so you'll need to play around with that. On the flip side, you might be able to take an opposite approach and say, hey, I'm okay with my cars not being rented out at all while I'm gone, so I'm going to price my cars at an extremely premium price point. That way, if they do get rented out, it's at least worth the time of trying to get help from somebody in order to check that car in and clean it. Really, I think there's pros and cons to both of these approaches, and it would just depend on you and your business model, as well as what your own expectations of income are for when you're traveling. The second tip is paying very close attention to when cars are being booked out. Whenever I have help from anyone that's helping me with my fleet, I will typically block off the cars until the next day. So for example, if a car gets returned at 3 p.m., I'm not going to go have a family member or a friend to go check in that car at 3 p.m. on the dot. I'm simply going to ask them, hey, when can you check in the car the next day? They'll give me the time, and then I will block off the car during that period of time. So making sure that the person who's helping you has plenty of lead time to be able to go check out the car, clean it, take photos, and do what they need to do. You never want to put somebody who's helping you in a position where they feel like they're in a time crunch, so managing your calendar really closely will help you do that. It'll also put your own mind at ease as well to make sure that you're not being overwhelmed while you're traveling. Unfortunately, traveling with a Turo fleet can be very difficult, and there aren't a ton of ways to mitigate this complexity. So I definitely think one of the best approaches is finding a family member or a friend that can help you. Of course, if you need to pay them, do that. Another option is, of course, if you need a pet sitter, maybe asking them if they'd be okay with managing the car sharing fleet, paying them a bit extra on top of that. It can be a really attractive option, especially if you find somebody that is like a college student or a teenager that really is looking for an extra way to make money quite easily. Turo is a great gig for them. The third complaint, and one of the biggest reasons as to why people leave Turo, is due to utilization issues, because their car isn't getting booked out, they're not making as much money as they thought, and their utilization is incredibly low. Whenever I find that people are struggling with low utilization, I would say 99.9% of the time it comes down to 3 factors. Number 1, price. Number 2, availability. And number 3, the type of car. First is price. Price is going to be the biggest factor that your customers look at whenever they're booking your car. If you have 2 cars that are priced the exact same, but one is 10% or $5 or $10 less expensive, which car do you think that person is going to go with? The cheaper one. It doesn't really matter if the more expensive one is a slightly different trim, is a little bit newer, or has less mileage. At the end of the day, those factors don't make a huge impact on whether or not a guest rents your car, and price is going to be the biggest factor. One interesting thing that I've even found throughout the years is that whenever you have a cheap car, people will come from a wide variety of different distances to rent your cheap car. For example, I know that there are other cars similar to mine in different areas of the DFW Metroplex, but there are a lot of people that will actually pay $50 for an Uber to my location to rent my car because it's one of the cheapest in the area. Once you take into account the Uber costs, the time, and the logistics of getting to my location, I'm willing to bet that there are probably cheaper options out there. But the thing is, whenever people rent a car, they see that daily price, they see that it's cheaper, and thus they want to rent that car. They don't really care if these other factors actually make it more expensive. So I do believe that hosts that are having perpetual issues of getting their car rented out, price is probably a factor, and I would recommend experimenting with lowering your price. Whenever I lower my prices, I will typically do this in about 5 to 10% increments. I will leave it like that for a bit, see if the car gets booked out. If it does, great, I'll just move on. If it doesn't get booked out, then I'll lower the price 5 to 10% more and just continue that cycle until my car is consistently getting utilized. Remember that pricing isn't going to be consistent all year year round. You're going to have to raise and lower your prices depending on the seasonality, and this is especially true if you're in a city or a state that's very tourist heavy. Availability is another huge factor, and this is one that plagues so many newer hosts. A host will list their car on Turo, they won't end up getting booked out, but then whenever you dig into the settings of their car, you'll find that they have a 12-hour advance notice. They don't have instant booking turned on. They have a 5-hour buffer time. They have multiple days throughout the week blocked off. The fact is that if you are a car sharing host that is wanting to make as much money as possible, you have to make your cars easy to rent. The way that I view calendar blocks is that you should only be blocking off your calendar if you absolutely have to. Like if the car is getting a repair, if you're really sick, if there's just no way you're going to be able to get the car to the guest, these are the only instances where you should be blocking off cars. Because whenever you have a calendar block, not only are you blocking off that specific day, but you're blocking off anybody who wants to rent that car during that period of time. So for example, if you have a calendar block on, say, June 15th, not only are you preventing people from picking up or dropping off your car on June 15th, but if somebody has a month-long rental and one of those days in that month is June 15th, you are blocking off that guest from renting your car. Calendar blocks has a huge impact on your utilization as a host, so I encourage you to lower the barriers for the guest to rent your car. Keep your availability as open as possible for as consistently as you can. And next is the type of car that you buy. In certain markets, Turo cars are oversaturated. One of the most consistent examples I use for this is Tesla. I am a huge proponent that Teslas are just oversaturated in most major markets in the United States. And if you are a car sharing host that's wanting to have your car as utilized as possible, you should not under any circumstances buy a Tesla. Buying a car that's oversaturated in your market is a great way to guarantee that that car isn't going to be highly utilized. Unless you can provide an edge on your competitors for that specific car, don't buy one that's oversaturated. And an example of an edge would be if you could buy it for an incredibly cheap price and thus undercut everyone else, which isn't something I would typically advise doing. You have to do market research to determine which type of car is best for your market. And I've talked about this in a number of videos in the past. One of my most recent ones I did about 6 months ago, and I will include a link to that down in the description below. But you should be figuring out which cars are in need in your market and how you can fill that need. Simply buying the car that you want to buy or buying a car that you commonly see on Turo, that's not a good approach. You really need to do your market research. And if you look at your pricing and you figure out that your price is okay, if you look at your availability and your availability is okay, and your description, your photos, all of these things look as though they're fine, but you still aren't getting rented out, chances are you have a vehicle that is oversaturated. And at this point, there are very limited things that you can do in order to spur up demand. Now, one final note about utilization is I have heard from other hosts and from my own experience that if you are having a car that isn't getting utilized, you can sometimes snooze and then unsnooze that car, and that will result in the car ranking better in the algorithm. I actually don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard it from a number of different people, so I almost always do it whenever I feel like one of my own cars isn't getting rented out as much as it should. It takes about 5 seconds, so it's worth experimenting with even if it does nothing. Your Turo claims are simply not getting approved, whether it's a smoking claim, a damage claim, mileage claim, whatever the case is. This is probably one of the biggest pain points for new car sharing hosts because they haven't figured out how to work the system yet and haven't figured out how to really follow the terms of service. And so as a result, they get their claims denied because they don't have sufficient evidence. And I would say 99.9% of the time, whenever a claim is denied, it is denied because of improper photos. Either you didn't take enough photos or you didn't take good enough photos. I cannot drive this point home enough. If you are a car sharing host that's wanting to grow a fleet and you want to be successful on the platform, you have to take photos, and a lot of them. For my normal everyday economy cars, I take between 100 and 200 photos every single time. I take photos of the interior, the exterior, the tires, the floorboards. Every single crack, crevice, corner of the vehicle gets taken a photo of. And the thing is that it doesn't have to be a time-consuming endeavor. You can literally hold your phone up and then hold down the shutter button and then walk around the car, go closer, further away, go up on the car. You can do everything that you need to do photos-wise within about 5 minutes. Truthfully, if you're taking more than 5 minutes to take pictures of your car, you're moving slowly. But hosts reach out to me all the time. It probably happens on a daily basis now, where they'll reach out to me either via email, through my course, or through Instagram, and they'll say, hey, I had a smoking claim or I had a damage claim, but Turo denied it. Here were my photos that I took. And you find out that the photo that they took was very far away from the actual evidence of whatever issue was presented. For example, if it was a smoking claim, instead of taking the photo right on top of the ash, they took it very far away, like almost outside of the car. That type of photo is never going to fly with Turo. And at the end of the day, Turo doesn't want to pay you out as a host. They don't want to pay it because it costs them money, but they will pay it if you report sufficient evidence. Over the years, I have had dozens of damage claims. None of them have been denied, and I've had hundreds of smoking claims, and probably only a handful have been denied. And that's over the course of like 6 years. There's no such thing as taking too many photos with Turo, and if you are somebody who is struggling to get your claims approved, it is most likely due to your photos. Take close-up photos, far away photos. Make sure you're taking photos of the areas in which you will most likely have to prove if an issue does occur. For example, the odometer and the gas levels, taking a photo in the center console where smoke oftentimes accumulates, in the door panel, on the steering wheel. These are very heavy traffic areas where if somebody is smoking in the car, it is most likely going to show in those spots. Make sure to take photos of the exterior car in good lighting, either during the day or if you need to take them at night, make sure to go to a gas station that does have good lighting. These are things that you absolutely have to do if you want to make sure that you're covered every single time. And truthfully, if you aren't willing to do these types of things, Turo probably isn't the right side hustle for you, which is okay. If you're not taking 100+ photos of your cars every single time, you're leaving money on the table. And if you are somebody who's experiencing issues with getting your claims approved, I'm going to be willing to bet that it is an issue with your photos. And if you improve your photos, your acceptance rate on these claims will also improve. Take more photos. That's your solution. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. At the end of the day, failure at Turo can come for a variety of different reasons, but I wholeheartedly believe and know based off of experience that these talked about in this video are some of the more common reasons as to why car sharing hosts quit. And if you take the advice outlined in this video, you should have an easier time managing your car sharing fleet, getting your car utilized, and of course, making more money. Like always, if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.